Hello, I am 64-bit Link, and this is my pacifist speedrun of Skyward Sword for the Nintendo Wii. Pacifist is a challenge category in which I will not be defeating any enemies through combat or damaging enemies through combat during the run. So it's a very unique kind of speedrun. So this means that instead of going through the game normally, I will be instead avoiding combat, and I will be setting up for a credits warp at the end of the run so that we can skip demise and doing various glitches to skip every other enemy in the game. So right away, the first thing that we are going to do in this game is we're going to be very pacifist, and we're going to go ahead and have a friendly conversation here with Fledge. This is going to set a memory value that we're going to be using later. You're also going to notice that the text is going to be in Japanese. This is because Japanese is the fastest language for this game, as the text scrolls 1 character per frame or 2 characters per frame if you are holding down the A button. So Japanese thus is faster because it stores more information per character than English or a lot of other languages. So we're going through some of the tutorial parts of the game right now, and we're also going to be coming up rescuing the Remlet, which is an optional quest in the game. And the reason we're going to do this is because this is also going to set flags that we are going to do later. So this is all going to be for a late game glitch, and unfortunately I do lose a little bit of time here because we want to skip a Horwell text trigger here by doing a very specific jump to grab that ledge without talking to Horwell first. Unfortunately, it's a fairly precise jump and I missed it twice. But I decided not to reset over that. So we have to do the various tutorial things here of pushing this box and grabbing this Remlet here. Coming back to Horwell, we're not going to go the way that the game quite expects. We're going to kind of go through this corner and drop down onto the very edge of the ledge, which is slightly faster than going the center path that the game expects. So after this point, the next thing we have to do is talk to Zelda according to the story, but first we're going to save our game, and then we're going to activate this game's main glitch, which is called Back in Time. And in order to do that, we need to die, and the only way to die right now is using this post here that we affectionately call Killing Post. This is often the place where runs die early on because it is kind of precise to get up onto that post. It's not too bad with a lot of practice, but it has definitely killed many a run for me, so I like to joke that Killing Post will kill either Link or the run. But with that, Link has died. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit continue on this prompt and reset the console at the same time. So this is going to activate Back in Time. We are now going to have control of Link on the title screen. This is a glitch that is shared between Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword, and it is used the most in this game by far. So now that we have control of Link on the title screen, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to void out about halfway up the stairs here, and that is going to cause the game to respawn us up at the top by the Upper Academy statue, and we're going to save our game again because we're on a special state of Skyloft right now. Well, it's a bit like washed out color-wise and doesn't have a lot of actors loaded. But the most important part of this state of Skyloft for us right now is the fact that the entrance to the goddess statue is already open. So we're able to enter it immediately. So the first thing we're going to do here is grab the goddess sword, and you're going to wonder, why the heck are we grabbing a sword when this is a pacifist run? Well, So this is part of the reason why we're on hero mode. So almost all Skyward Sword runs are done on hero mode. And this is done for 3 reasons. One, we can skip cutscenes, as I'm doing right now by holding down the 2 button. Secondly, we are taking double damage, which you noticed on the killing post. We took 2 hits every time we took damage. And the final one is that we actually have the empowered Skyward Strike. We have the same Skyward Strike that you would have in normal mode once you fully upgrade the Master Sword to the true Master Sword, which means it charges faster and the Skyward Strike travels much further. So what is the whole point of this back in time sequence? Well, what we are trying to do here is we are trying to get the Farron Pillar onto our file early. We're gonna do a bunch of the early game stuff out of order, and it's gonna look really weird, but the end result is that we want to be able to put ourselves into Farron Woods in back in time. And this requires a very specific state on our files in order to not crash. Now, the other thing is, so the only thing that we got on our file right there was the Farron Pillar. So we did not get the Goddess Sword even though we obtained it. And the other thing I should mention about that is that what we did there is called reverse bit magic, which is a recursive acronym because bit is back in time. And so we transferred a flag from the title screen onto our file. So now, having gotten the Farron Pillar back in time just after we started our file, we now have it on our file. And that is the simplest application of back in time that we're going to see throughout the entire run. And we're going to see more complicated instances of it as we progress throughout the run. But now we have the Goddess Sword, we have the pedestal raised. And so those are 2 things that are going to be very important later. So now we're going to kind of do a little bit of more intended gameplay. So we have just met Zelda, because that cutscene is triggered when it left the goddess statue, because it basically just put us right into the trigger. So now we picked up a stamina fruit, and now's a good time to explain stamina management. So stamina fruits refill our stamina, and the way that stamina management is going to work for most of the run is I'm going to be trying to keep the stamina meter mostly within the last quarter of the meter, because the last quarter drains twice as slowly as the rest of the meter, but it refills at the same speed. So it allows more efficient use of the stamina meter. The other thing is that you're gonna see me rolling a lot when I have short distances to travel. So stamina is used, or rolling consumes more stamina, but on average, you move 1 frame faster per roll. So here we are entering into Rinna's house here and saying hi to Rinna. This is also not just to be friendly. We are also setting more flags onto our file that are eventually going to be useful on the title screen. But to finish up the discussion of stamina management here, so basically we're going to use rolls either to accelerate us from a standstill, or we are going to use them when we're traveling short distances. When we're traveling long distances, we're just going to sprint normally. So here we're entering Waterfall Cave. Waterfall Cave has a little bit awkward movement here, but it's fine with practice. So we're gonna get grabbed by this chew here and take some damage from it. And so putting us on 2 hearts means that we're 1 hit from death from most things. And that's the state that we're gonna be in for a lot of the run. It makes Skyward Sword runs kind of scary a little bit because you're always kind of 1 hit from death, because you want to be able to activate back in time or do a death warps quickly in this game. So it's one of those things where it does take a lot of practice because you kind of have to do a lot of these parts of the run hitless. So now that we've been a bit more friendly, we've talked to Zelda, which this particular interaction with Zelda is just hard required. We're going to save and quit our game and we're going to copy our file. So this kind of has to do with the fact that we're going to want to have our different files at different stages of the game or with a different set of flags. And so in this case, file 3 is saved right before rescuing the Loftwing. And we're going to continue on file 2 for now because we want file 2 to have the Loftwing rescued for the next glitch that's going to be coming up. But we also want to keep file 3 without the Loftwing rescue. Also, don't pay too much attention to me screwing up the sword slashes there. Cage break, this cage break can be kind of annoying. So what I do there is I do a jump / quick spin to quickly break the one side, and then I do a side hop, and the goal is to then do 2 slashes and a spin to quickly break the other side. But I wasn't correctly lined up for the first slash, and then everything went wrong. But now we're in the Loftwing tutorial. Get used to seeing this Loftwing tutorial, except paste the title screen on top of it. You're going to be seeing that a lot throughout the run. But other than this, like the Loftwing tutorial, there's not really that much for us to do. But at the end of the Loftwing tutorial, we're going to be saving, and then we're going to be attempting a 2-frame side hop out of the save prompt. If we can do that, we will side hop out of a cutscene trigger and save a bunch of time, because we're going to want to activate back in time again right out of this. And I did succeed. If I had failed, there is a backup that costs about 50 seconds. So it's a backup that is good for marathon runs or if you're doing a no reset run, but otherwise, generally this is a reset point in the run. And we go right into another reset point. So this is going to be the Sky RBW, where RBW stands for Reverse Bit Warp. We're going to be doing a warp into the sky. And we're also going to be doing what's called a file dupe. So you'll notice I selected the blank file 1, that's a blank hero mode file, and I backed out of it. So now when I save, because I haven't like selected explicitly selected a file, it is going to duplicate my highest file onto the file I had last selected, which is file 1. And it's going to be in kind of a weird state. So what that means for us is that it's going to copy all the state of our file, but we're going to load it into the sky. So now we have basically a copy of file 3 loaded into the sky. Now, I did not quite do the optimal setup for it there, because in this run I was still kind of in a bit of a no reset mindset. For a proper PB attempt, I would do a faster strat that is a bit less safe. And if you fail this trick, then you load the file, and because the file is now duped, you don't really get to redo it. So here we triggered a phi trigger, and that phi trigger is going to allow us to dive off our loft. And now we need to death warp. And unfortunately, this Gwei decided to troll me a little bit. And I lost a little bit of time there, and by that I mean I screwed up a little bit. So yeah, unfortunately I probably lost a good like 20 seconds to this. This is definitely a part of the run that I need to put a bit more practice into. But yeah, now that we've death warped, because this is a copy of File 3 and File 3 was saved right before rescuing the Loftwing, it's going to put me right back there. So now we're going to have a bit of deja vu. We're going to be rescuing the Loftwing a second time. I still managed to do a horizontal slash instead of a vertical slash there. We'll ignore that and just continue on. So now we're going to load into the Loftwing tutorial again, except now we have the ability to dive off our Loftwing, which is normally not possible. So now I'm going to be doing a specific number of flaps to get a significant amount of height. And then I'm going to look for a specific visual cue of where that zipper is on screen. And then I'm going to dive off my Loftwing and I'm going to dive onto that zipper. And I'm doing that so that I can take damage down to 2 hearts again. Because when I death warped, I refilled back to 6 hearts. So now I'm going to be doing a dive into the Farron Pillar. And so this is going to be me entering the surface for the first time. And we've still done things a little bit out of order. And the big thing is that normally you're supposed to kind of get the sailcloth and do a Phi escort, and then that's the point where you're supposed to get the Goddess Sword, and after you get the Goddess Sword and place the tablet, you get the Hero's Tunic. We haven't done any of that, so you'll notice that the state of this area is not looking quite correct. Normally there's a fence that bars the way, and there's some Deku Babas, but instead we can just jump slash down, and this allows us to quickly activate back in time. Now, those who are familiar with any percent are going to expect us to start doing the Skyview reverse bit warp now, but we actually have other plans that are actually going to be the first steps of Pacifist. And ironically, that Pacifist is going to be us getting a second sword. Because, yeah, that is definitely how we be a pacifist. So we're going to be doing another back in time glitch here, where I'm going to be deleting my third file and then immediately saving it again. And this is going to create what's called a corrupt file, and that corrupt file contains mostly zeros because it's been deleted. And so that's going to include Link's health, which is usually why we create a corrupt file, but not why we create a corrupt file here. In this case, we just want a file that has no state on it, and that is going to be important so that this doesn't crash. So by having the corrupt file here, we can avoid a crash, and then we're going to RBM the practice sword onto file 2. And the practice sword is not really what we're after. What we're after is a cutscene trigger that happens after you get the practice sword. And we're going to want to activate that cutscene trigger later on. That's going to be useful for memory values here. So we reloaded there with the Bazaar because back in time will not activate if you're on bit Skyloft on a file that has been previously saved on Skyloft. This also means we can avoid reselecting the Bazaar statue, which means that we can use it for commits. So with commits, I should probably kind of get into bit magic in general, the forward bit magic. So what we refer to as a commit, and here we're going to be copying our file so that we can have the state of that file for later on. So you'll notice that I bonked that tree. And now that I bonked that tree, the Academy gates are open whenever I select file 2. And that's because it's a Skyloft file, so it has all the flags that are normally set on Skyloft. So here I'm saving file 1, and that's going to serve 2 different purposes. So the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to set the coordinates of that file. And that's actually going to be very important for the reverse bit warp that we're going to do. Ignore that bonk. The second thing that that's going to do is it loads the story information from file 1, and that's going to include the fact that I rescued the Loft One. And now we're going to be diving into the Farron Pillar. And so we're going to dive in, and you'll notice that I selected file 2 before I during this dive. And the reason why I did that is so that we dive in with a file that hasn't been to the surface yet, and therefore we won't trigger the statue select screen, because the statue select screen would crash. But then once we get past the cloud barrier, I can select a file that has been to the surface, and that means I get a faster landing animation into, or onto the surface here, specifically into the sealed grounds area. So now I'm going to select file 2, and I'm going to be trying to do a hop onto the log as the log comes down, because that's going to allow me to pop up quickly to the ledge. Now, I did make a little bit of a mistake here earlier, where in how I selected the save statue on Skyloft. So I pushed in the log all the way with file 1, and that's to decommit a flag that I had accidentally committed onto it, because that Upper Academy statue has a side effect in Farron Woods where it will activate the Floria Gate cutscene if I look in that direction, and I don't want that. So by decommitting that flag onto file 1, I can now safely select file 1 and file 3 while I am in Farron. So now I'm going to save my game here, which is going to just give me a little bit, or give me a respawn point that's a little bit closer, because what I'm going to do next is I'm going to be death warping with an Octorok up here. So I'm going to position myself so that the Octorok can attack me for 2 hits, and then I'm going to attempt to pick up the Octorok, which is going to deal the final hit to me a little bit faster. I did make a small movement mistake there. Now, the purpose of this is that we want to get to Deep Woods. And the vine to Deep Woods is a little bit special. Now, a lot of the other flags that you've seen of logs coming down, you've seen that they kind of reacted as I selected the file that had that flag set. The Deep Woods vine, though, only checks the state when the area first loads. But if I death reload the area, then it will check the flags from that file like immediately upon load, and now this vine is down, when it would not have been earlier. So now we're going to enter Deep Woods. And I'm going to be doing like a very kind of specific sequence of file selections to basically load the flags from back at the beginning of the game when I rescued the Remlet. And I'm going to then use this to reverse bit warp into Skyloft. You'll notice, if you're familiar with any percent, that how I did this looked a little bit different. And that's because in any percent, the way that you normally would reverse bit warp into Skyloft means that you would go in there, you would reload with a mini boss room, and then you would defeat the mini boss room to reload the dungeon. That would not be legal in Pacifist, though. So what we do instead is we save, and we are gonna activate back in time again, and we're going to be doing another RBM. And this is going to be our first scene flag RBM. The last two RBMs that we did are what we call story flag RBMs. They're flags that are the same everywhere in the game, and they track state that needs to be kept across the entire game, and that multiple areas need to be involved with. However, in the case of a lot of other flags, they are specific to one area. So in this case, we're going to be unlocking the shortcut gate that goes between the final room of the dungeon before the boss door and the central hub room that has that big circular room in the middle where you get the beetle. So we're going to go ahead and do this very long sequence in Back in Time where we're going to deliver this barrel to Henya, and then we're going to get a rupee from Fledge. And it's the flag of getting the rupee from Fledge that happens to share a memory address with the flag in Skyview Temple for that shortcut gate being open. So we're gonna be slowly moving this barrel over. And so the way that this works is that the game, whenever it loads an area, it copies the flags from that area to a temporary memory location where it can use to update those flags. And therefore, when we start our file and then a flag sets, the game has loaded in the flags from Skyloft. From Skyview Temple in place of the flags from Skyloft, so then it's going to set that flag. So now we have the gate open, and we're going to be doing a second RBM. So now, because the dungeon is reloaded, there's these keys that are here that were not loaded the first time because of the way that we reverse bit warped into the dungeon. So we can now die with those keys. So the other thing is that the first time we had an auto commit because there's some kind of temporary flag that sets the first time that you load that room, and in doing so it automatically committed the flag that we made to that temporary copy of the scene flags. Now for this next one, we're not going to be so lucky. We're going to have, so what we're going to do is we're going to roll into the trigger for this Sheikah Stone cutscene that is activated from having gotten the practice sword. Now, this flag is not going to auto commit, so we're going to have to make some kind of change in this dungeon, and that is going to copy all the flags from this temporary copy of the scene flags back to the actual copy of the scene flags, and then all of those changes are going to take effect at once. Both the flag from the Sheikah Stone cutscene and the flag from, in this case, breaking the rope, basically freeing that rope there. So now we're going to probably kind of one of the more annoying parts of Skyview, which is vines. Vines can be very tricky. And so what we kind of want to do is do some very specific movement with this so that I can land on this with one swing of the second vine. Unfortunately, I failed it the first time because I didn't have a good enough angle. So I lost some time, so we're gonna do it again. And the second time I have the correct angle so I can get to the chest and get the boss key. And so now you might be wondering what I could have possibly RBM for the second flag. And I think there's definitely some theories here. Also H, because the boss key of this dungeon looks like an H. So we're gonna enter the boss room and you're like, okay, how do we get out of this one? Because we've avoided combat all up to this point. But now there's a boss here. However, it seems that Girahim forgot to lock the door. So we're just gonna leave. So yeah, that is what that RBM did. That RBM used to be done in a very old version of any %, and the only reason it was faster in that old version of any % is because in that old version of any %, we needed to copy our file in Skyview anyways, so it was just convenient to do it. But in Pacifist, it's required because we need to skip the boss. So now, having beaten this dungeon, we're going to just save and quit our file. If we were to continue, we would trigger a cutscene outside of Skyview, and it's much faster to skip it. And in addition, by leaving that cutscene trigger there, we're actually going to trigger it later and back in time and use it as a teleport. So there's going to be very little surprise that we're going to be activating back in time again. So Pacifist means that we're not going to be dealing any damage to enemies, but Link is unfortunately not going to escape the violence here. So we're gonna see kind of a familiar pattern here, but actually this is gonna be kind of special. So what we're gonna do here is we're going to select the statue with file 2, and then we're gonna save file 1. So we're gonna load in scene flags from file 2, but we're gonna load in the Loftwing from file 1. And then we're gonna pick up that heart flower, and that's gonna update our inventory, and specifically it's going to load in the ruby tablet so that we can place it in back in time. And so, unfortunately, I bonked with the Loftwing there, but we can fly here up to the goddess statue, and it's a little bit faster than running there normally. And so now if we load into the goddess statue with file 2, which is our Skyloft file, the pedestal is already going to be erased. And so now we can place the ruby tablet. And we're going to do the same thing that we did in the beginning of the run. We are going to RBM the Elden Pillar onto our file. So now we're going to be able to fly to Elden. And so yeah, we're going to start our file shortly after the cutscene camera change there. And you're going to notice we still don't have the hero's tunic, and that one consequence of that is that a lot of the Loftwing stuff is not going to quite work the way that you would expect. So here we have to fly over to the windmill in order to load into the sky, because that's the only sky loading zone. And we're also still stuck in the Loftwing tutorial, because we have just rescued the Loftwing, but we have not gotten the hero's tunic yet. So we're confined to the bounds of the Loftwing tutorial, but only as long as we're on the Loftwing. So by diving off, it removes us from the Loftwing state, and then we can dive and we can enter this zipper here. And we're out of bounds at this point, so what's going to happen is the game's constantly trying to force us inbound. So it's going to force us inbounds, but as a consequence of that, the game's never going to unset that we're no longer in the zipper, so we just keep the speed from the zipper. If only we could do that for normal flying. And so now we're in Elden. There are about 1.5 billion ways to skip early Elden, but it turns out that the early part of Elden actually has a lot of very useful flags. And so we're going to actually run through this early part of Elden to do a bunch of other nonsense things in order to set those flags. And they're going to be very important coming up. So we're going to run past all these enemies. They should not bother us as long as we're fast. And so we're going to blow up a few boulders here. Now that one doesn't have a cutscene attached to it, so we're going to blow it up first. And then we're going to blow up another boulder that does have a cutscene attached to it. And this is mostly to avoid the cutscene playing while we have a bomb in our hands, which would cause the bomb timer to run out at an inconvenient time. And here, my movement was not quite optimal, but we actually want to heal ourselves. Because although we're going to be doing a back-in-time sequence, we're going to need to take damage after that back-in-time sequence completes. And you might be wondering, why did I heal the full? If it's healed 2 damage, why did I heal the full when I could have healed to 5? Well, that key answered your question. Because unfortunately it decided to hit me, and Key's still 1 damage. So I'm still good. I will just take damage down to a single heart and enter Earth Temple with 1 heart. So what we are going to do here, after we've done a bunch of things to set a bunch of flags that we're going to use later, is we're going to do a bit warp. So I talked about reverse bit warps, and what the reverse bit warps did was take the coordinates I saved at and then back in time, and then apply them when I started my file. Now, what a regular bit warp is going to do is I'm going to save and start my file at the same time, and that's going to load my file, but then take the coordinates and put that onto the map that I loaded. So, unfortunately I misjudged my stamina there, and when I rolled, I ran out of stamina, and that caused me to void there and lose a bunch of time. But that being a bit unfortunate, we'll just continue. We're going to go ahead and fly back into the Farron Pillar, and this is going to be a familiar sequence where I'm basically doing the same thing that I did the last time. Now, one other thing that you'll notice me doing is that I'm hitting start on the fade out when I'm going into loading zones. And if I do it on that very fade out, for some reason that we don't quite understand, it causes the next load to go slightly faster. So there I slightly missed the pop up that I was doing. But in this next area, we're going to bit warp at this bird statue here. And this is going to load us out of bounds, but it's going to give us quite a bit of height, so we're going to take some damage because we don't have the sailcloth. And we will not be getting the sailcloth at all this run, so anytime that we would take fall damage, we have no way to prevent it. And so that is the reason why I needed to heal. And so we're going to be traveling through this out of bounds sequence, and the terrain here is kind of funky. There's going to be a few times where we're going to need to sprint, and there's one time in particular coming up where it's going to be a little bit difficult, and I need to be very careful to not misjudge my stamina, or I will just fall off and take damage in the lava. So here I'm using a technique called stutter sprinting, where I am basically pressing and releasing A in order to reduce my stamina meter a bit more slowly. So after that kind of difficult section, the rest of it is fairly easy. And so I'm gonna be able to side hop over the lava there and then jump slash down onto this rock. And then there is one more bomb that I am gonna throw down here to knock down this tower. Now, I was not very confident about that bomb throw, so I threw a second bomb, but that second bomb was completely unnecessary. The first one was completely fine. And the cutscene there, for some reason, my camera was really weird after, and I almost walked into a cutscene trigger I didn't want. So I saved there, now I'm going to be activating back in time again. And this is probably one of the longest but most important RBMs of the entire run. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be RBMing the item wheel. Now you'll notice that when I skipped a ton of stuff, and one of the things I skipped was the slingshot. Now that is bad news because the slingshot is what gives you the item wheel. And if you skip the slingshot and then you try to get another item, the game just soft locks because it tries to pull up the item wheel to show you the item that you just got, but because you don't have the item wheel, the game doesn't know how to handle it, so it just soft locks. However, since we have access to Farron in back in time, we can just RBM the item wheel, and then we'll be able to get other items no problem. Now, you might be asking, okay, why did we not just get the slingshot? Now, most other categories that get other items get the slingshot. So, Restricted Bit gets the slingshot, All Dungeons gets the slingshot, and 100% gets the slingshot. Now, the big problem is that getting the slingshot requires us to defeat 7 bokoblins, which is against the rules of this category. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing all the steps to get the slingshot in back in time, but we're going to be using bit magic with the flags that we got in Elden to remove a lot of the obstacles for getting the slingshot, and that includes setting flags for the enemies being defeated. This is completely within the pacifist rule set because the pacifist rule set is only concerned about killing enemies through combat. It says nothing about glitching the game in a way that those enemies just aren't around anymore. So what we're going to do here is the same kind of thing that we did before, where we have a flag that only checks on load. So we're going to do a death reload with our first file here to cause all these flags to get set correctly and all the state to be reflected correctly in this area. We're also going to be very careful with how we do our file selections here. So you'll notice that I was kind of doing some weird file juggling there. So I need to select file 3, which is a file that hasn't beaten Skyview yet. But then I selected that save statue there with file 1. The end result is that I get a State of Farin Woods where I can rescue all the Kikwis, but the first Kikwi, Machi, happens to be already rescued. And that's a side effect of beating Skyview Temple. When you beat Skyview Temple, for some reason, it also sets the flag for Machi being rescued, which is very convenient for us because rescuing Machi causes Fi to bring up the map, and bringing up the map back in time will always crash. Now you'll notice I brought up the copy menu here, and you might be wondering, okay, so what am I doing? Now, for the rest of this RBM, I cannot either reselect file 1 or select another file that is not file 1. If I do, I fail this RBM completely. And it's because each of these Kikwis sets a story flag when you rescue it. And if I were to select file 1 again, it would recommit story flags and I would lose the Kikwis that I had rescued. And that would be disastrous. So by going on the copy menu, it gives me some insurance that I don't accidentally reselect a file. It also makes it far easier to see what I'm doing compared to having file 1 selected. Whereas if I had file 1, it would cover most of the screen. It would make it very difficult for me to see what's going on. Whereas with the copy menu, like, it's still blocking the screen somewhat, but I can still see what's going on. Also, you'll notice back there, I did move in a slightly suboptimal way because I wanted to dodge those ruins. And unfortunately here, what I want to do is jump slash into that hole, but I was positioned in a way where the jump slash took me over the hole instead. And you can see here where that copy menu insurance paid off because I accidentally hit the option to go off the copy menu. So during this cutscene, I can go back in. Now, the one thing though is that I can only activate the copy menu during these cutscenes where I'm talking to the Kikwis. The button to activate nice, running out of stamina. The button to activate the copy mode is the same button that activates the map. So I want to be careful to not do that while I'm in normal gameplay. But now that I'm talking to Buka, I'm basically done with this sequence. There's basically no possibility that I accidentally move off the file at this point, and the rest of the movement is really easy. So yeah, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get the slingshot. And I'm going to start my file like right before the slingshot moves up to the upper right of the screen. And now I want you to pay attention to the upper right of the screen. So you'll see that the B button now exists on the HUD, whereas it did not before. And so that means that we have successfully RBM'd the item wheel. We'll be able to activate the item wheel, and more importantly, we'll be able to get an item on the item wheel. And that item on the item wheel is going to be the bomb bag. And that's going to be required for us to do the credits warp. So now this next back in time sequence, we're going to be opening the Earth Temple early. So normally to open the Earth Temple, you need to dig up 5 key pieces that are hidden in dig spots around the Upper Elden region. But we don't have the digging mitts, and also going and doing that would be slow. So we can do this RBM instead to just force the door to be open. And so what this RBM is pushing the gravestone. So we're going to go ahead and push the gravestone, and then that is going to trigger the entrance cutscene for Earth Temple. And Earth Temple is where a lot of magic is going to happen. It's also probably the most difficult part of the run. So it's kind of the Skyward Sword tradition where dungeons begin by saving and activating back in time. And this is a little bit different from how you would do Earth Temple in any other category. In any other category, you would lower the first drawbridge, and then you would save at the middle statue. But we can't lower that first drawbridge, because the only ways to do it is to either have the beetle, which we have not gotten, and not only would it be way too out of our way to get, but it would also require us defeating an enemy. And there's also another way to do it called Kisi, where you Skyward Strike a Kisi in a specific way where the Skyward Strike will cut the rope or the top rope of the drawbridge. We can't really do that either, because that in 99% of cases will kill the keys. And while it has technically been done where you can Skyward Strike the rope in a way that doesn't kill the keys, that is way too unreliable to do RTA. So we will not be doing that. Now, that first RBM that we did is an RBM that's done in virtually every category, and it's going to raise the second bridge that goes up to the back half of the dungeon in the room that has the boulder. And that's done in every category. This second RBM is a RBM that is exclusive to this category. So we're going to be entering the sparring hall again, and this RBM also involves the practice sword chest, but we're not going to be quite RBMing getting the practice sword. Instead, we're going to be RBMing a flag that happens to set like midway through opening the chest. It's really strange. There's like 3 flags that set during opening this one chest, and I think they have to do with the camera. And so now I'm going to be doing some specific movement here where I'm going to try to keep this these 2 platforms off screen as long as possible in order to manipulate their platform cycle. And then I'm going to be cutting this specific rope in Death Warping. That specific rope is going to set a flag that is going to be required at the very end of the run for the credits warp. And now we're going to be saving, and we're going to be activating bit again. So we're going to be loading file 3 this time. And just because it's probably faster to do this than to cross the platforms and die with a chew that's on the other side of the platforms. The timing's probably very close, but I want to say this is faster. And so now we're going to be doing another Farron bit. And this Farron bit, the first part of it's going to be very similar to what we've done before. And in fact, probably the next like 3 minutes are almost identical to the Skyview reverse bit warp that we did at the beginning of the run. So since this is all stuff that you've seen before, I'm going to talk a little bit more about kind of like what the rest of the run is going to look like from this point. So we've already gotten the Ruby Tablet to get into Elden, and we're in process of getting the bomb back. So what we're doing right now is going to be a bit warp that's going to put us past that first drawbridge, because we cannot cut that top row. We're then going to get the bomb bag, we're going to skip the Scaldera fight, and then we're going to do a couple more things in Elden, and then we're going to be heading to Lanayru. In Lanayru, we're going to be getting the harp, and then we're going to be setting ourselves up to be able to open the Gate of Time. And then we're going to be setting ourselves up for the Credits Warp. The Credits Warp is going to use a technique called Cutscene Wrong Warp. And what that means is that we're going to be wrong warping our file into a cutscene. And the specific cutscene that we ultimately want to wrong warp into is going to be one of the pre-credits cutscenes that takes place in the Temple of Hylia. So we need to be able to access Temple of Hylia, which means that we need to be able to open the Gate of Time so we can access it back in time. And then we're going to need a specific entrance value that's going to correspond to that cutscene. And yeah, that is basically what we're going to need. And the rest of the run is going to be about setting that all up. Let's see if I can do a better job of this Death to the Octorok this time. That was a better job. Okay, so now that we're on our way to Deep Woods, you're gonna notice I'm gonna actually enter Deep Woods with File 1 this time. So File 1 has beaten Skyview. And so we're gonna trigger this cutscene that I alluded to that takes place immediately after you beat Skyview with Machi. And this functions as a teleport that's gonna teleport us in front of Skyview. And then we're gonna bit warp at a fairly specific position against the statue. I don't think it's all that precise. And then I need to kind of immediately get ready because this Lizalfos can choose to just immediately attack me. And it is gunning for an attack right now as I free the hole. But it didn't actually hit me, thankfully. So I do take a hit to the spume there, it's fine. The most important consideration is that I don't accidentally roll over the spume, because the spumes there tend to not have the greatest sense of self-preservation. So here I'm going for a cutscene skip for this boulder. I unfortunately don't quite get it. It is something that I need to practice. I can get it occasionally, but I'm not terribly consistent with it. Now, normally entering here, you would do a cutscene skip with a slingshot, but we cannot do this. And also, I think stunning enemies is a little bit nebulous as far as the rules. But you'll notice this bombs just exists. So we're just going to grab the bomb bag now. Right in front of these Lizalfos' noses. And then they also forgot to lock the door, so we're just going to peace out. So that's what the second RBM accomplished. And now, as a reward for breaking the game, we get the very cool mini-boss music for the next part of the dungeon. And then we're going to... Led's gonna just keep talking to us. He's gonna give us our first few bombs to fill our bomb bag with. And now we're going to head over for another just random boulder to blow up that's gonna set an important flag. So I'm keeping an eye on the platform signal in the distance, and I'm gonna flip the camera around when it's about where I want it. I did it a little bit early in this case. And so the goal is for this to blow up the boulder. That did not succeed the first time, and I think what happened was that I threw the bomb a little bit too early, and the platform hadn't completely risen, and therefore the bomb explosion was not close enough to that boulder. So yeah, we don't need the chest, we just need to blow up that boulder because it's going to set a flag that we're going to need later on. Sometimes you can roll right through that chew. It's completely fine in Pacifist because that deals 0 damage to the chew. It's just kind of funny if it happens. And Link wins by doing absolutely nothing. And so now we're going to climb up to the top of the dungeon and we're going to get the boss key. So here for this second section, you're normally supposed to solve a little puzzle here, but we can skip it by stutter sprinting up this slope, which is fairly easy. It's something that anybody could do in their casual playthrough. And so one thing you'll notice, and this has happened before, is that sometimes I'll roll out of a cutscene and my stamina meter will be red, and that's because I happen to roll out of the trigger frame perfectly after having depleted my stamina into the previous cutscene. So whenever you see that, it means that I got a frame perfect roll. So it's a sign that I'm being optimal. Now, in almost all other categories, you would just immediately go and defeat Scaldera, but we can't do that. So we're going to do the final RBM of this dungeon, and that is going to be Scaldera's Skip. And so the first half of this is going to be the same as basically any of the other back in time instances. So one thing is that diving into the pillar is kind of difficult, and one note is that although the Elden Pillar is within the bounds of the Loftwing tutorial, the Farron Pillar is not, and that's why I have to dive off my Loftwing very high up and dive down into the pillar. Okay, so here's where things are going to start being a little bit different. So we're going to have to go to Deepwoods again, but now we have the bomb bag. And the bomb bag means we have a way to actually bring down that vine. Because it turns out that a bomb can uncurl the vine for us. And this is something that is used sometimes in randomizer, so it's really cool when randomizer tech can be adapted for vanilla speedruns. Even cooler when I get to do it with a title screen in front. So here I'm trying to line up my position, and then I want to wait for a specific bomb flash, and then I can throw the bomb, and it will explode right as it gets into range of the curled up vine and uncurl it for us. And then that is a part of the route I did not have memorized yet, so my hesitation there was me looking at the route. And so this is fairly similar to kind of what we did to get into Skyview, but we're not trying to do anything with Skyview this time. It's just that this, again, is a useful teleport for us. Now, what we're going to RBM is a flag that sets with this specific cutscene of Gorko near this goddess cube, where he wants to tell us all about this goddess cube. So if we start our file and then roll into that cutscene trigger, you saw the cutscene briefly flash onto screen during the fade out. So now, having triggered that cutscene, we've committed it, and now Scaldera is dead. Or I should say Scaldera is dead. We have skipped Scaldera. We've set the flag for the ending door being open. Now that RBM turns out to be kind of precise, and the way it happens to set is kind of weird, so it's probably, out of all the RBMs in this run, the one you are most likely to fail. But I think it's consistent enough. So we're gonna pick up a few bombs, and those bombs are going to be useful for later on. And so, yeah, now it just so happens that with Scaldera specifically, setting the flag for the ending door being open just kind of yeets Scaldera out of existence completely. So yeah, Scaldera just forgot to show up for work today, which is very convenient for our pacifist run. So yeah, now we're gonna fly back to the sky, and you might expect us, okay, we just got the Amber Tablet, and now we should go place it, but we're not gonna quite do that yet. There's another flag that we want on Eldin, and it will be also useful for us to get another bird statue in Eldin onto our file for later. So we're going to actually fly back down to where we were before we did the bit warp out of bounds. And now we have the bomb bag, and the bomb bag's going to allow us to skip the magma turf section where we would normally get the digging mitts. Unfortunately, we cannot skip this cutscene that we normally would be able to skip with the slingshot. So what we can do is we can line up a bomb throw to hit the trigger for the lava draining. And unfortunately, I took a couple tries to get it, and it turns out it was third try. It is possible to do that trick without the bomb bag by throwing a bomb up from below, but that is something that is not great for... Or that's something that... Yeah, it's something that's not usually done in runs, like some people will go for it. Now what I was gonna say is, the reason we get bomb bag is to skip that around that shortcut to get here. So talking to that magma is very important. It is going to allow us to get to Betro back in time, and that's going to be important for a couple things. But yeah, so we save out this bird statue. That is going to be useful later on. And now we're going to activate back in time, and we're going to head back, and we're going to use it to head back to Skyloft. And we're also going to make a copy of our file. So that we have access to those flags for the next section of the run. And also it's going to be very important that we saved at, or that we had landed at the statue that we landed at, because there's actually going to be 2 cutscene wrong warps that we do, and the entrance ID of the statue that we landed at is going to be preserved on our second file. So we're going to use that to wrong warp into a cutscene a little bit later into the run. So you'll notice that we RBM'd the last 2 pillars, but this pillar we're just going to get the intended way. And the reason for this is because while we've avoided getting the hero's tunic up until now, at this point we're going to get the hero's tunic because we need to be able to fly to Lanayru. And right now, the only file that could fly to Lanayru is our third file, because the third file hasn't rescued the Loftwing yet. So the way that kind of works is that if you have a file that hasn't rescued the Loftwing yet and doesn't have the hero's tunic, it just defaults to the normal sky, which means you get if you fly up from a pillar, the game will just auto mount you onto the loft wing even though you don't have it. This is very convenient, but the problem is we want to be able to get to Lanayru on the file that has Bombat. So the only way we can do that is to get the Hero's Tunic onto our main file. Now I should note that we made the copy of that file before we got the Hero's Tunic, so we're fine there. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to do another bit save of our file, this time at the Bazaar statue. And this is going to allow us to quickly get to the sky, and it's going to skip the adventure pouch and a cutscene with Phi that would normally appear. Now, as a consequence of that, we're never going to get the option to remove the Wiimote HUD that is permanently on the screen. Now, most Skyward Sword runners have just, like, gotten used to that HUD being there, so we don't even really see it unless we're specifically looking for it. But it's something that a lot of people who watch runs of this game are confused about, is why don't we get rid of that HUD? And the reason is because it costs time to do so. Or in the case of any percent, in this category, you just never get the option to do so. So now we're going to activate Back in Time again. And this time we're going to do an RBM that does not require us to leave Skyline. Instead, we're going to meet our friendly neighborhood demon, as you do in a pacifist speedrun. And so we're going to check the Bazaar statue with the file that is still saved in Eldin. And that's where that whole sequence that we did after Earth Temple comes in, because that's going to unlock the door to Betrot's house. So yeah, don't worry, we're protected from this evil monster by File 1. Nothing can possibly harm us. And so, we just scare Betrot by pulling out a bomb. That's entirely within the definition of pacifist, because we never harmed him. And if he's just scared by us pulling out an item, that's his problem. But it also means we get to have a friendly conversation with our friendly neighborhood demon. And he is going to give us some advice for navigating navigating Lanayru, sorry. But in order to take that advice, we need to first attempt to talk to this broken robot here. That's gonna commit the flag. And now we're going to go back up to the sky. And now that we land again, we're gonna see a bird statue that we haven't seen before. And this bird statue puts us behind the rubble, blocking access to Temple of Time. And that's convenient because now we can get access into Lanayru Mining Facility. And now we're just gonna leave Lanayru Mining Facility again, because all we need out of it is the harp, and we get the harp by leaving that loading zone. Now, unfortunately, I was attempting another 2-frame cutscene skip here, and I failed it. This one, unlike the one on Skyloft at the beginning of the run, does not save nearly as much time. This one, so we only lost 15 seconds by failing that cutscene skip. So having gotten the harp, we're going to go back and re-enter Lanayru, back at the beginning of Lanayru. And you might be wondering, why did we spend this 5 minutes detour to get the harp? And there's like 2 or 3 things that getting the harp does for us, and we're gonna see those as the run goes on. But it's an important thing for being able to open the Gate of Time. And while you can technically open the Gate of Time without ever getting the harp, it is a lot slower to do it that way. So now we're going to do another bit warp, and this is a much simpler bit warp. We're just going to bit warp using the Upper Academy statue. So again, we're going to go ahead and start and save our file at the same time, and that's going to load the map our file is on, but load the coordinates from back in time. It's going to put us very far out of bounds. And now we're on out-of-bounds collision that exists way out of bounds. And we have no idea why there is collision this far out. There's a couple theories, one of which is that, like, there is a part of the credits where the camera pans around here, although that still doesn't necessitate this area having collision. But it is very fortunate for us that this does have collision, because it means that we can access Lanayru Gorge early, and that is what we are going to do. So now we're in Lanayru Caves, which is kind of like this small little hub in Lanayru between Lanayru Desert, Lanayru Mine, Gorge, and the Sand Sea. And here I decided to pick up a few extra bombs for safety, because I had failed the bomb throw previously. And so now we're in Lanayru Gorge, and this is the area that really lets us break the game. So we're gonna save here, but the first thing that we're going to do actually is not going to concern Lanayru Gorge at all. it's most convenient for us to take care of this thing now. And so I alluded to the fact that we were going to do a cutscene wrong warp with our second file, and now is the time to do that. So now that we've shuffled our files around a bit, the way we're going to do Farron bit has changed a little bit. So we're now going to save file 3 instead of file 2, because we don't want to mess with file 2 at this point. It's saved in exactly the state we needed it. And then we also, because we have the Hero's Tunic now, we have the ability to instantly load in the sky, but we need to select the file that has the Loftwing tutorial, because if we just loaded into the sky purely with file 1 with the tunic, then it would crash the game, because the main layer of the sky will always crash in back in time. And so now we're also going to dive into the pillar now with the file that has the harp. And this is because doing that is going to trigger the event where Groose grabs onto you as you're diving down. And that cutscene is going to put us directly into the behind the temple area, and it's also a way to prevent getting the statue selection screen. And so we're going to enter the sealed temple, and now we're going to be dying on file 2. And having died, we're going to be doing a very well-named trick called Death Trick. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be hitting continue, and then I'm going to be starting my file in a specific 2-frame window. And I failed it the first time. And I failed it late, and I know that I failed it late because I just respawned it back in time. If I had failed it early, the game would kick me out of back in time and do what's called a continue trick, where I would just load my file normally into Sealed Temple, which is also what I don't. Now, I failed it the second time as well, which is unfortunate, but it is way better to fail late than it is to fail early, as you can imagine, because getting kicked out of back in time means I need to do that whole sequence over again. And that time succeeded, because you saw this like very white screen, and then you heard the sound of a cutscene skip. So now you see Groose and Impa there chilling. And I'm just gonna death warp out of there, and that's gonna put me back into Elden. So what that did was it wrong warped me into one of the post Skykeep cutscenes. And because I was able to skip that cutscene, it then reverse bit warped me into the very next area that I would be in after that cutscene, which is the Sealed Temple. So now I am on file 2, and file 2 is in a state where it has beaten Skykeep. So I'm actually going to go ahead and re-enter Earth Temple. And I alluded to the fact that I was setting flags there that were going to be needed for later, and now is later. And here I 64 gore that I had full health. So I expected that jump into the lava to kill me, and it didn't. But I can just bomb myself into the lava to take 4 hearts of damage at once, and now I can activate back in time from there. And now we're going to be back to Lanayru Gorge shenanigans. And so the first part of this back in time sequence is going to be very similar to what I just did. So yeah, I'm again diving into the pillar with the file that has the heart. This is going to be the same for every single Farron bit for the rest of the run. Except now what I'm going to do when I get past the clouds is I'm going to select my 3rd file. It's very important that I select that specific file. My first file would trigger me into a conversation with Groose that I don't want to have yet. My second file would mean that the loading zone to Sealed Temple here would put me into the post Skykeep version of Sealed Grounds, which I also don't want. And here, trying to recenter my cursor, I accidentally invited Fi to tell me that my batteries were low. But I also then selected my second file there, which committed its flags, because in that particular layer of the Sealed Grounds, it will auto-commit files. And also, I failed once, but then succeeded at a trick called log jump, where I push the log only part way, and then I can just jump up to the ledge. So here I'm going to kind of repeat a thing that I did previously, where I want to do a death reload to reload the state of an actor in this area that only checks its flag value on load. So I'm going to reload with file 2. So now it's going to use the file 2 flags, file 2 being saved in Earth Temple. And what that is going to mean is that because I blew up that one boulder, Machi is just kind of chilling there with no Bokoblins attacking them. And so, being able to RBM that flag without having to defeat any enemies, I can now resave. And so what that did is it set a flag for the minecart in this area to be moving. And that's going to be very important, because what I'm now going to do is I'm going to bit warp out of bounds, just like I did in the Lanayru Mine. So I'm also going to copy my file here. And that's just because I want to have a file that is before I do this next sequence. And so I'm gonna do a bit warp here with a very specific position with this Lower Academy statue. It's gonna put me on the very edge of a cliff. And now I'm gonna run towards this other cliff that's in the opposite direction. And so the collision up here ends abruptly, so in order to continue, I need to do a specific setup to jump where I can jump and then grab the ledge. Or more precisely, I'm gonna kind of try to run up the wall and grab the ledge. And the first time I failed it, so I'm gonna just void out again. And then the second time I succeed. So I attempt to run up the wall and instead I just grab the ledge, and that's gonna put me on this upper area. And from this upper area, what I want to do is I want to get to the end of the minecart escort. So it's not really showing on the camera here, but the minecart is in fact moving across this area. And yeah, you can see this blue circle off in the distance, and that's from the time shift stone on the minecart being active. And here I'm doing a trick called the brake slide, and that just allows me to move very quickly through the quicksand by running and then in one frame switching to holding the control stick slightly back and targeting, which causes Link to shuffle and maintain his speed in quicksand. And here I'm gonna do a very precise bomb throw, and I got it first try, which is really nice. And so that's going to allow the minecart to go the rest of the way. You are supposed to have the hook beetle there to grab a bomb flower that's on a nearby ledge, but we don't have the hook beetle. So luckily, Jace, who is a top level runner of this game, was able to figure out a setup where we can very reliably hit the bomb throw there. And so now I'm just sitting around waiting for the minecart to snap into its center position. And then I'm going to save after the screen shakes from the minecart snapping into the center. And you might be wondering, why did I go through all that effort to do that? Whip-de-doo, I have a minecart now. Well, we're going to do one more RBM, and that is going to set us up to break the game. So this RBM is going to start out the same way. So there's not much to say for now. But one note is that now that we copied to file 3, it's going to be a lot easier to dive into the pillar. Because all we have to do is open file select, and whenever you open file select, it will always load the data from the highest numbered file, which is file 3. And so now we have a file with the harp selected, so we can just dive into the pillar. Now, unlike our last couple of Fahrenbits, we're actually going to keep the same file this time. And that's going to trigger the continuation of this Groose sequence. So now we get to say hi to Groose. And we're very interested in being a pacifist. We're just having a friendly conversation. Groose is not necessarily feeling as friendly, though. So we're going to chase after him. Because we want Groose to be just as pacifist as us. And that's very important that I wait before opening the file select here, because otherwise I will cancel this next cutscene, and I don't want to do that. So now Groose is going to be getting into an argument with Impa, making all sorts of funny voice acting lines. Whenever I do runs, I love to just imitate his voice acting here. Especially the no that he does as he runs out of the Seal Temple. So we were unsuccessful in making Groose into a pacifist. But what's the next best pacifist thing we can do? We could just pull out the harp and start playing it. And so we want to start our file at a very specific part during this harp tutorial. And in doing so, we're going to set a flag that's going to trigger this spy text. And the spy text is congratulating us on finding a part of the Song of the Hero. And having done so, the Thunder Dragon is magically healed. Because the game just assumes, okay, since we got that part, Song of the Hero part, or since we got that phi text, it just attaches getting that Song of the Hero part to the phi text. And then, therefore, it assumes, okay, the Thunder Dragon must have been healed because we got that phi text. And so now we can play his boss rush minigame, and you're probably wondering, why the hell do we want to do boss rush in a pacifist speedrun? Because surely we don't want to fight the boss. And you would be correct, we do not want to fight the boss. So what's the alternative to fighting the boss? The alternative is failing to get stomped. So now I need to run a bit far away so I don't accidentally damage him. And I'm going to just commit die here. And so by dying to this boss fight, what's actually going to happen is the game is going to set a bunch of flags. Now the reason that this happens is because the game assumes that we're at the end of the game because that's the only time you're supposed to be able to access boss rush. So what it does is it removes a bunch of progression flags to set up for that boss fight. And then after that fight ends, it has to give back that progression, but it never checks to if we had that progression to begin with. So therefore, we just get the story progression for free. Now, that first imprisoned fight that we did was just to set flags that allow this second imprisoned fight to not crash when we go into it. And now that we got stomped by the second imprisoned fight, now the game thinks that we beat the second imprisoned fight. And in doing so, we now have the Gate of Time open. Or, I guess that isn't quite correct. We now have the ability to open the Gate of Time, because the precondition for being able to open the Gate of Time is having the Gate of Time, or is having Imprisoned 2 defeated. So now you might be thinking, oh, okay, well, is it time to open the Gate of Time yet? And the answer is not quite. So I mentioned that we need to do a credits warp, and the credits warp is going to be a cutscene wrong warp. So that means that we need a specific entrance value. So the next segment of the run is going to be about obtaining that entrance value. And we're going to obtain that entrance value on our third file. And it's just going to be so convenient to do it on that file. Because it just so happens to be, yeah, really it's just because it has 2 hearts on it, so it's going to be easy to activate back in time for mitigate. Now, I made a mistake here and slept to night instead of sleeping today. We need to sleep today to advance the Betrow quest. Because the whole point of the Betrow quest is that Rinna's daughter Kukil has gone missing. And so now we can go ahead and tell Rinna that we have found Kukil in Betrow's house, and Kukil is completely fine. And she rewards us with 5 gratitude crystals. And as it turns out, we need 5 gratitude crystals in order to do the next back in time sequence. So now we're gonna fly back to Elden. And if you remember when I said earlier about how we were getting a flag and a bird statue, well, that bird statue is coming in clutch now because we're going to land there. And if you know this game, you know what we're going to do next. Now, one awkward thing about this bird statue when you land at it is, for some reason, it puts you just outside of range of being able to talk to that bird statue. I guess they figured that casual players were not going to just land at a bird statue and then just try to immediately save at it. But come on, you've got to do something for us speedrunners. Let us break your games, Nintendo. But yeah, so we're going to, now that we have 5 gratitude crystals, how about we go turn in those gratitude crystals to Betrow? So we're gonna basically do the same thing that we did before to enter Betrow's house. So this time file 3 is the file that's in Elden, but it still has the flag. Unfortunately, I didn't quite jump slash in the correct position, so I lost a tiny amount of time there. And Link really loves to parkour off doors that you want to enter. But yeah, we're going to talk to Betrow here. We're going to get a wallet upgrade we don't care about, but then we're going to get a flag that we do care about. So that is the last RBM of the run. And that flag auto-commits, so all we need to do is reload the area, and a death warp is a very convenient way to reload the area. And we are going to enter this trial gate that has appeared out of nowhere. So, looks like we've got 15 tiers to collect. Like, we've got a very long trial ahead of us. Let's hope I don't get caught by any guardians. Just kidding. I'm just gonna turn around and Fi's gonna ask me if I want to leave the trial, and I'm gonna say yes. This is the entrance value that we need for the cutscene wrong warp. It corresponds to leaving the Elden Silent Realm. And now that we've left the Elden Silent Realm, we can save, and now we have a file that we can wrong warp into the credits. And everything that we have done thus far has led up to this final back in time sequence. So this is going to be a Farron bit, just like all the other ones that we've done. So yeah, because of the fact that we now have file 3 set up to do the cutscene wrong warp, we're gonna bit save file 2 instead. We will ignore me fumbling around trying to select the statue. So yeah, now file 3, it still has the harp, so we can still use it to dive into the Farron pillar, and we're again going to have a friendly conversation with Groose. We'll see if this time Groose is a bit more receptive to the pacifist idea. So yeah, also I'm going into the copy mode again here, and again, this is not because I actually want to copy a file. This is to prevent me from accidentally deselecting my file here, because I need to carry the flag of having talked to Groose into the Seal Temple. Now this time I am actually going to mash out of the splash screen here to interrupt the cutscene, because I don't want to play it. And so I'm going to select that statue to commit file 2 flags. So we're going to go ahead, enter that cutscene there of getting the Ballad of the Goddess, and that's going to allow us to Skyward Strike the closed gate of time. It doesn't seem to do anything, but we can leave, and what I did there was I backed out of the menu and opened the door around the same time, so I was able to use the lag from that menu closing to avoid accidentally selecting a different file, because here I want to reload it without selecting anything else, so now we have an open gate of time to go through. And because that file has beaten Skykeep, we can now enter Hylia's Temple in that state. Now, there's not going to be a gate of time on the other side, so the cutscene of us going through it is a little bit broken. And we are going to go ahead and death warp here, because we're going to be doing another instance of death trick for this cutscene wrong warp. And unfortunately, we failed it. But we did fail it late, so we get to retry. Yeah, unfortunately, that was another fail. And that's the run. Now, in my original run, the live split timer said 1:55:05, but I think I both split late on that run, and I split late for starting on this commentary, so I think the run is actually a 1:55:04, but I would have to frame count it to be sure. But yeah, we're in the credits. We have successfully convinced Bruce to be a pacifist. So yeah, this is a really cool category. It's very unique across the 3D Zelda games. There's games like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask where with SRM you could do a pacifist run, but it's so trivialized by SRM that the run is like 5 minutes or 15 minutes long with basically trivial, whereas this run you have to do 2 dungeons, you have to do a bunch of other setups, so you have a run that's pretty non-trivial, and I think there's a lot of really cool stuff in this category, like the item wheel RBM that you don't see in any other category, and also boss skips that you'll never see in other categories because the boss skips are just slow. So yeah, thanks for watching. Leave questions in the comments. I'll try to put stuff in the description if I realize I forgot to say stuff in this commentary. And yeah, thanks for watching. See you next mission.